to establish a tribunal against Putin so that its decisions become a historic counterpart to the Nuremberg trials. President Zelensky called on European politicians to do this. The world needs an honest verdict, emphasized the president of Ukraine immediately after signing the agreement to create a special tribunal on the aggression against our country. The document was signed late the previous evening in Strasbourg. The president of Ukraine arrived at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe with a delay after the NATO summit. Nevertheless, he was greeted by a full hall. European deputies welcomed the creation of the special tribunal with a standing ovation. The legal process to establish this judicial body was launched back in May. Not only Russian leaders, but also the self-proclaimed head of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, who provided his territory, infrastructure, and military bases for the aggression, may be prosecuted for crimes of aggression. However, it will only be possible to deliver a verdict against Russia's top leadership, the president, the prime minister, and the foreign minister, once they are no longer in office. To mine the border with Russia, Poland is withdrawing from the Ottawa Convention. The country's parliament, the Sejm, has made the corresponding decision. This convention prohibits the use of anti-personnel mines. Warsaw made this decision in line with the Baltic countries and Finland. As previously reported by the media, this concerns a plan by European countries to mine the border with Russia in order to protect themselves from the aggressor country. The Ottawa Convention was supported by 164 countries in 1997, but Russia has never signed this convention. Moreover, it has a large arsenal of mines and uses them extensively in the war against Ukraine. As a result, 5 NATO countries concerned about such a dangerous neighbor want to protect themselves in case of an invasion. Trump's plan was carried out. The American CIA announced significant damage to Iran's nuclear program amid a scandal involving a leak of information. Earlier, several reputable media outlets, citing sources in the U.S. Department of Defense, reported that intelligence in its report believes that the U.S. strikes on Iran managed to set back the country's nuclear program by only a few months, rather than completely destroying it, as Donald Trump had claimed. The American president immediately criticized the media, while the Central Intelligence Agency, citing new intelligence from a historically reliable and accurate source, insists that the damage has set back Iran's nuclear program by years. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has begun investigating the leak of information about its report, and the Trump administration plans to limit the sharing of classified information with Congress after the current leak. A new package of European sanctions against Russia. Today, the European Union is expected to give it the green light. This was announced the day before by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. At the same time, he emphasized that restrictions from Europe alone are not enough and that more active participation from the United States is needed. Merz said he discussed this with Donald Trump and asked the American president to personally approve new restrictions against Moscow. The German chancellor also expressed hope that the United States Senate will pass a law on new sanctions against Russia in the coming days. Let me remind you, the document prepared in Washington provides for tariffs of up to 500% for countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, coal, or nuclear fuel. Meanwhile, Brussels had previously proposed, among the suggestions for the 18th package of restrictions, lowering the price cap on Russian oil from $60 to $45 per barrel, new sanctions against the shadow fleet and the banking sector of the aggressor country, and a ban on EU countries buying petroleum products made from Russian raw materials. To mine the border with Russia, Poland is withdrawing from the Ottawa Convention. The corresponding decision was made by the country's Sejm. This convention prohibits the use of anti-personnel mines. Warsaw is making this decision in line with the Baltic countries and Finland. As previously reported by the media, this is about a plan by European countries to mine the border with Russia in order to protect themselves from the aggressor country. The Ottawa Convention was supported by 164 countries in 1997, but Russia has never signed it. Moreover, it has a large arsenal of mines and uses them extensively in the war against Ukraine. As a result, 5 NATO countries, concerned about their dangerous neighbor, want to protect themselves in case of an invasion. So, Will Russia want to test the strength of NATO's Article 5? Be sure to share your predictions in the comments for this broadcast on YouTube. And of course, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, I'll continue with the TSN online broadcast. "24 enemy drones were neutralized by the Air Force in the skies over Ukraine last night. In total, the enemy attacked our country with 41 Shahid-type attack UAVs. The Russians launched aerial targets from the directions of Bryansk, Kursk, Primorsko-Akhtarsk, and the territory of the temporarily occupied peninsula. Mainly, the occupiers focused their strikes on the frontline areas of Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. According to the Air Force, strikes by attack drones were recorded in 7 locations. Kherson region went through a hellish night and morning. The Russians attacked the village of Tavriisk with guided aerial bombs from aircraft. A man was killed and another was injured. At dawn, more criminals attacked the Korabelnyai district of Kherson with artillery. They strike it almost every day. Residential buildings were once again hit. All that's left of them are charred remains and ruins, as you can see in this video. Educational and medical institutions were also damaged, as well as the building of one of the city council departments. A 71-year-old woman was trapped in her own home. Rescuers freed her and managed to put out the fire in time, which had started because of the enemy attack. The victim received medical assistance on the spot. She suffered a concussion and her blood pressure spiked.
It's terrifying when everything is falling down on you. It's horrible. And it's dark. You don't know what's happening. There was an explosion, and then the whole shockwave. Right here, even at home, the window shattered, and they also sprinkled it on the neighbors. Where are we supposed to hide? Our basements are shallow. In the basement, everything blew up. Even the cover flew off in there.
She opened it and heard everything start falling down on her. That's what happened. She went up to the door, tried to open it, but it wouldn't open. The guys came and carried her out.
Donetsk region is on fire. This day, there were 2 killed and 15 wounded there. In Bylazarsk, a Shahid drone hit a 5-story building and several apartments caught fire. 5 residents were injured. Among them were a 15-year-old boy and his mother. 1 person was killed and 8 wounded as a result of FPV drone strikes and artillery shelling in Pokrovsk, Kostantinivka, and Torsky. 1 person was killed and another wounded in Novoyavlinka. There was also a casualty in Oleksandrivka. The occupiers used aircraft and drones to attack the Kharkiv region as well. In Vodiane, a 50-year-old woman was killed as a result of an air bomb explosion. Her husband was wounded. In the village of Petroivanivka, a 60-year-old resident did not survive the shelling. There is destruction in the Kupiansk district and in Izium. The occupiers carried out more than 430 strikes on Zaporozhye. They used all types of weapons, dropped 5 air bombs, and launched nearly 300 drones. Locals who still remain in the frontline communities report about 24 destroyed apartments and houses. A cafe caught fire, a business was damaged, as well as an infrastructure facility and private homes. These are the consequences of the shelling in the Nikopol district of Dnipropetrovsk region. All night long, the Russians fired artillery and attacked with drones. And in the suburbs of Dnipro, a recreation area was damaged. The number of people killed by missile strikes on Dnipro has risen to 20. 2 more were killed in the neighboring city of Samara. As a result of the Iskander missile attack, more than 300 people were injured, including dozens of children, and the youngest is only 6 months old. A damaged enterprise, dormitories, more than 50 apartment buildings, hundreds of private houses, medical facilities, nearly 40 schools and kindergartens, as well as a church, an ice arena, a house of organ music, and a correctional facility. The Odessa-Zaporozhye train, which was carrying 500 passengers and was just approaching Dnipro, was also hit. There are still 112 wounded in hospitals, including 7 children. 13 adults are in serious condition. The armed forces of Ukraine have stopped the advance of the occupying troops in the Sumy region. At present, the line of contact there has been stabilized, according to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrsky. At the same time, according to Reuters, as early as July or August, North Korea may once again send its soldiers to Russia to take part in the war against Ukraine in order to scale up the offensive attempts. For now, the enemy has managed to advance near Oleksivka, Dnipro-and-Araya, and in Shevchenko, which are located just a few kilometers from the administrative border with the Dnipropetrovsk region. Andrivka and Konstantinopol in the Donetsk region have come under the control of the occupying forces. This was reported the day before by deep state analysts. In total, there were 154 combat engagements along the entire front line over the past day. The Pokrovsk sector remains the most active. There, our defenders stopped more than 50 enemy assaults in the areas of Poltavka, Mern, Myrolobivka, Yudakny, and other settlements. Another 24 attacks were repelled by the armed forces of Ukraine in the Novopavlivka direction. Almost as many were repelled in the Lyman and Toretsk sectors. 2 Russian sergeants were eliminated, an escort vehicle was destroyed, and at least 4 railway fuel tankers were hit. A new video of the successful strike on the Russian train has appeared online. Let me remind you, this happened on Sunday in the temporarily occupied part of Zaporizhia near Molokansk. At that time, special forces from the main intelligence directorate, working together with the Southern Defense Forces, attacked the enemy freight train with drones. The train was carrying fuel intended for Russian troops. Columns of smoke rose for dozens of kilometers. In the new footage, you can see enemy soldiers trying to shoot down Ukrainian drones with small arms. But they aren't very successful at it, even though the Russians claimed they shot down half of the 14 drones. A propaganda referendum with a predictable result. The Hungarian authorities have announced the results of the poll on Ukraine's accession to the European Union. The referendum was conducted by Prime Minister Orbán's ruling party. He also made a show of voting. Budapest claims that 95% of those who took part in the poll were against Ukraine joining the EU. I should note that, according to official Budapest, 2.2 million people participated in Orbán's referendum. 78,000 Hungarians, and that's only a third of the total number of voters. Moreover, the leader of the Hungarian opposition party, TISA, Peter Magyar, previously stated that the actual number of people who voted was even lower. We're talking about roughly 600,000 people. In Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Hungarian referendum is called a crude manipulation, and they emphasize that such a poll has nothing to do with the principles of democracy, openness, and transparency in expressing the will of the people. Meanwhile, Lithuanian President Nausėda has called on partners to set a clear political goal for Ukraine to join the EU by January 1st, 2030. In your opinion, how will these European disputes end? Be sure to write about it in the comments for this broadcast on YouTube, and, of course, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Meanwhile, I'll continue with the TSN online broadcast. A powerful blow from the elements in France. There, due to severe storms, 2 people have died and 100,000 are without power. Various regions were affected by the bad weather. For example, in Paris, the storm even impacted a parliamentary session. When the speaker noticed that the hall was starting to flood, the session was briefly interrupted to deal with the leak. In the French capital, some streets and metro stations were flooded and the wind knocked down trees. The scale of the storm is evident from the data provided by rescue services. During the bad weather, they responded to 2,500 calls across the country. 17 people were injured. Strong winds tore down power lines and, in some places, even bent utility poles. Because of this, thousands of French residents experienced power outages. An uninvited guest at a Japanese airport. A bear disrupted operations at Yamagata Airport. The animal was first spotted in the morning. Several flights were delayed as a result. The bear disappeared from sight, but returned a few hours later, this time onto the runway. As a result, the runway was closed. While airport staff tried to chase the animal away, about 15 flights to various cities, including the capital, had to be canceled. Hunters were called in to help. They set up traps on the airport grounds. In recent years, wild bears have been visiting Japanese cities more and more often, And scientists link this to climate change, which affects food sources and the hibernation periods of the bears. And that's all we have time to tell you about. Stay tuned to this channel. There's always something interesting here. Yeah.